Hi, I'm Tim Janisewski. Welcome, Spotlight Matthew, Invitation to Joy. And we have seen that Paul says in chapter 1, verse 18, in these things I rejoice. And we want to know why Paul is rejoicing so that we can apply that to our own lives as we learn how to rejoice in Jesus Christ as well. And what do we find? First of all, Paul says, I am rejoicing because my circumstances have turned out to advance the gospel. He's there in prison, in house arrest, but he's got Roman guards he can witness to. He's sharing Jesus. The gospel is free in new and beautiful ways because Paul is incarcerated. We ask ourselves, what are our circumstances and how can we use them to free the gospel to get to more people and to rejoice as it does so? Well, Paul gives a second reason why he's rejoicing in verse 14. He says, and most of the brothers and sisters, having become confident in the Lord by my imprisonment, are much more bold to speak the word without fear. Here Paul says, look, I'm getting to share the gospel with people I wouldn't have shared before, but what is also fantastic is that my testimony of sharing the gospel, why I am imprisoned under house arrest, is witnessing to fellow believers here in Rome who are free people. They're not under house arrest. They're not under constraint. There is no persecution upon them that I'm suffering at this time. And instead of my imprisonment for the gospel causing them to shrink back with fear or withdraw, to be afraid that they better shut up and keep quiet or else they're going to be in big trouble with the Roman officials also, it's actually worked in the opposite way, says Paul. These Christians here in Rome, he's writing to the Philippians, they see that I am all in for sharing Jesus when I am under house arrest, imprisoned. So they are beginning to feel that they can be all out for Jesus as free men and free women and free people. And what's occurring here is a lot of them are actually getting a little bolder. Those who would have shrunk back and not shared the word about Jesus Christ, God's love, God's message, the great response and the great outcome or result, they are starting to look for opportunities that they would not have looked for before. They're telling their friends about the gospel message. They're getting to their relatives with the good news of Jesus Christ. They're talking to associates at their workplace or in the marketplace about things. They're sharing the good news like gossip across the back fence with their neighbors. And therefore, my being in prison is actually causing more people to feel equipped and emboldened to share Jesus than probably would have happened if I hadn't been in prison. And Paul says, this gives me great reason to rejoice. The word here that Paul is giving is that everyone's to be a partner in knowing the good news about Jesus Christ. And once we know that good news about Jesus Christ, we're to be partners in propagating and proclaiming that gospel to other people. And we're to encourage one another to share the good news through our life and life circumstances. That's what Paul wanted for the church in Rome, so that the gospel would go forth and more people would believe and trust in Christ. And he saw it happening, and he was more than willing to be imprisoned if it meant that his brothers and sisters would have a new boldness to share Jesus out in the free world of men and women and young people and children. And that's what happened. So let's be free men and women. We are not imprisoned for the gospel. Let's be inspired by Paul's example 2,000 years ago today and be like those Roman Christians who, seeing Paul go for it with God from prison, decide to go for it with God, with our friends, with our relatives, with our associates, with our neighbors, in our community, in our workplace, in our neighborhood, in our cities and our towns, and even around the world. Let's proclaim Jesus Christ and rejoice that we have the opportunity to be those who share the good news. Think about that, pray about that, read, reflect, and by all means, respond. That is Paul's invitation for us to rejoice. It's an invitation to joy. We'll talk to you next time.